Okay, guys, now we have a pretty controversial moment on the album. Track number 13, The Waiting Room. Uh, this is a hard one to get into, guys. I'm going to warn you. On first listen, and second listen, and third listen, and on and on and on, you may not understand this song. It was only until I got into the band King Crimson and really absorbed their albums Starless and Bible Black, Lark's Tongues and Aspic, and Red that I truly really understood what Genesis was trying to do with this song. This is an improvisational jam, which they referred to as the evil jam, and it's meant to be like a really dark. This is probably the darkest point on the album by far. It's just so ominous. It could have been in a horror movie. This could have been on a horror movie soundtrack. And it's just the band trying to set up the atmosphere, really trying to evoke like just pure dread in the listener. And it is not a pleasant listen. I mean, the first 3 minutes of this song, it's just as dreary as you can get. There's like a droning sound in the background that kind of sounds like a steamboat approaching. And it's supposed to represent certain death. I mean, the title character, Rail, he's expecting death. And it's just the perfect musical representation of it. So this is what I mean by you can't really look at the album track by track. You really have to see what the song is trying to do, what mood it's trying to set, and its place in the overall album. And it's genius. I mean, this song works perfectly in the context of the album and really sets up the mood for what's about to come. And the great thing is, about 3 minutes in, the song totally changes and just adopts a much lighter tone, with the whole band coming in and this cool jam section coming in that just builds and builds and speeds up. And I love that part of the song. About 3 minutes in, when it just changes, it feels like the clouds bursting and the sun appearing after like a long hailstorm. And the crazy thing is, Phil Collins swears that when they were actually playing this song in the studio, right after that dark instrumental section in the first 3 minutes, and like when they picked up the pace into the lighter section, the sun actually burst out of the clouds. It was a rainy day apparently that day in the studio, and like the second they got to that part, the sun just burst through the clouds and just lit up the whole area. So you know what? God was on Genesis's side, okay? So if that isn't enough motivation to love this album, then nothing is. God himself was speaking to Genesis. I'm just joking, of course, but that's just a crazy story. So The Waiting Room, very atmospheric track, very inaccessible, experimental, but perfect fit on the album. And for that reason, I'm going to have to give it a strong 7.5 out of 10. All right, guys, track number 14, we got the song Anyway. Definitely the most underrated song on this entire album. And I'm not saying this is like the best song on the album, but it's definitely the most underrated in my opinion. And I don't want to go on a tangent, but I find the word underrated to be kind of stupid because like how you rate a song at the end of the day is just subjective. But for me, in my opinion, I feel like this song doesn't get enough praise as I think it deserves it does. Because this song is just great. It's just another heavy, hard-hitting, very classical, very piano-driven tune with some of Peter Gabriel's most existential lyrics. I mean, is earth but a hole in heaven, or heaven but a hole in earth? I mean, come on, that's some profound shit right there. And man, this song here is just incredible. I mean, you think it's already great with the great piano riff, you know, the bumping's nearly over for my sweetheart. I mean, that's fantastic. But then about a minute and a half into the song, it just bursts. It absolutely bursts into this frantic classical piano solo. And then you got this amazing guitar playing in the background with that hard and heavy hitting riff, and it's just wow. It's just an extremely intense song, another moment of darkness on the album, and just definitely deserves more praise. Again, it's only a 3 minute song, so maybe that's why a lot of people don't consider it an epic, But you know what? It's an epic 3 minute song, if I do say so myself. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna give it a 9.5 out of 10. It's a flawless track and just one of the darkest moments on the album. Coming in at number 15 on the album, we got another weird track, another kind of out of place tune on the album called The Supernatural Anesthetist, which is basically this weird, quirky guitar waltz written by Steve Hackett. And just such a strange song, and just such a joyous and uplifting guitar solo, but in the context of the album, really disturbing because you had the heavy hitting tracks, the waiting room, and then anyway, and then you have this, which is just this uplifting guitar waltz written by Steve Hackett. And I mean, the only lyrics on this song are literally, "Here comes the supernatural anesthetist. If he wants you to puff it, all you have to do is snuff it. He's such a fine dancer." That's literally it. Those are the fucking lyrics. And apparently it's supposed to be about death personified. Basically, Rail meeting up with death in like the personified form. Just such a weird song, but I love it. It's just so quirky, so Steve Hackett-y. And it gets into this weird symphonic section at the end that sounds exactly like the shit Yes was doing on Tales from Topographic Oceans. It'll just immediately strike you. When you hear this part of the song, you're immediately going to think, oh yeah, they definitely got influenced by Yes on this track. And yeah, again, just such a weird song, but I love it. I mean, it's just such a unique track. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. And yeah, definitely check it out. And at 2 minutes, it doesn't really overstay its welcome. So really cool song.
Looking behind me, the water turns icy blue. The lights are dimmed, and once again the stage is set for you.
Track 16, The Lamia. If you guys haven't guessed it yet, this is my favorite song on the album. Not only one of the best Genesis songs, but one of the best songs of all time. It is absolutely gorgeous. Probably the most gorgeous, the most emotional song in Genesis' entire catalog. And I mean, I find that this song is just, again, I'm going to use the word underrated, even though I don't like that word. I'm going to use the word underrated because I feel that this song gets so overlooked on this album, especially with so many people saying that side 3 is just chock full of filler, and yet you have like this epic 7-minute masterpiece filling out half of side 3, and then the rest of side 3 is just a bunch of fantastic songs. I have no idea why people, again, I have no idea why people say side 3 of this album is full of filler, because the Lamia is just one of the most gorgeous tracks of all time. And I mean, if you thought the Carpet Crawlers was gorgeous, oh my god, this is a whole other level of just beauty. I mean, I really think what makes the song, well, there's two things that make the song. The first thing is Steve Hackett's insanely climactic guitar solo at the end. One of just the most emotional solos of Steve Hackett's career, one of the absolute best. And the other thing that makes the song is really Peter Gabriel's vocals. I mean, this song is a vocal tour de force. And it's also a lyrical tour de force. It describes Rail finding himself in this cave, being seduced by the Lamia, which were these evil snakes that would lure people in and seduce them with sex and like their, I guess, illusions of female bodies, and then they would eat the person. But it turns out that Rail's blood poisons them, and then he eats them. So it's just a twist on that classic Greek mythological tale. And a pretty dark and disturbing song, if you ask me. And Peter Gabriel just sings it perfectly. I mean, there's just so much passion in his voice. And the music in the background is just absolutely, like, dripping with emotion. It's just, oh man, it's just so beautiful, so gorgeous. And again, with that Steve Hackett guitar solo at the end, just extremely climactic. And the interesting thing is, at its core, this was a Tony Banks composition. I mean, he wrote the song. And again, it's just proof of his genius and proof of Peter Gabriel's genius, because Tony Banks wanted to write the lyrics to this song because it was kind of like his baby. But Peter Gabriel was like, nope, I'm wearing the boots right now. I'm writing the lyrics. And thank God he did, because lyrically it's one of the strangest and best Genesis songs. So yeah, the Lamia, 10 out of 10. Best song on the album, in my opinion. Nothing even comes close. And I'm also going to lump in the song Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats with the Lamia, because it's kind of like a nice, relaxing come down from the Lamia. And again, people might think that it's filler, but it's just really beautiful, really relaxing. You got like the mellotron in the background. You got this beautiful droning, and it's just great. Like you could picture yourself just drifting away in a boat at night, relaxing, looking at the stars. And again, it's that atmosphere that just keeps me coming back to this album. So I'm going to lump those two songs together and give them 10 out of 10 because they're just insanely amazing.
You better run and join your brother John.
You're in the colony of Slippermen. There's no one all around. You get out if you got to ride. To see the doctor die with those nights here without the wintry ride.
Okay, guys, we finally made it to side 4 of the album. Arguably my favorite side on this entire beast. Well, side 1 gives it a really strong run for its money, but side 4 probably is my favorite song, my favorite side on the album. I love how like straightforward to the point it is. We have like less metaphorical songs, less atmospheric instrumentals, and more story-driven songs. I mean, like, I think most of the storyline of this album is just jam-packed onto side 4. Because really, so far throughout the album, we had a lot of flashback scenes. We had a lot of weird atmospheric instrumentals, like the waiting room and things like that. Only when we got to the Lamia did the storyline really pick up the pace. And now we continue on with track number 18, The Colony of Slippermen. The second epic, I guess, yeah, the third epic track on the album after In the Cage and the Lamia, clocking in at about 8.5 minutes long. And this song here is just, it's again, one of my favorite Genesis songs of all time. If I had to compare it to any of their previous songs, I would compare it to Get 'Em Out by Friday and The Battle of Epping Forest, because this song is just a vocal tour de force. I mean, Peter Gabriel crams in all the lyrics into this song. He voices different characters, all kinds of like different tones, especially with the Slipperman voice, with the really harsh Slipperman voice, kind of like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. And it's just such a weird and just dark and poppy track. And it's another one of those strong Tony Banks moments on the album. I mean, his synthesizer solo on this is just insane. And when it reaches that climax, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's just an extremely uplifting part of the track. And again, vocally, I mentioned Peter Gabriel's voicing all the different characters. You know, the Slippermen, which are these deformed. Basically, what happens after you have sex with the Lamia, you change into this like Slipperman, kind of like a walking syphilis, walking STD kind of monstrosity. And basically, Rael ends up turning into one of these things because he did have sex with the Lamia. And the only way to save himself is to visit Dr. Diaper and have his cock castrated off, believe it or not. So really bizarre, really strange lyrics. And on top of that, this giant raven flies in from the sky, grabs his dismembered penis, and flies away. So now Rael's on a quest to get his cock back, and it's just the wildest and craziest Genesis song ever. I also got to give a mention to how it starts off with that weird kind of like atmospheric keyboard section. I guess is the only way I can describe it. That really suits the song perfectly, because it really sounds like you're walking into this slum, this derelict village. And that's pretty much what's happening. Like, Rael had just faced the Lamia, and now he's kind of stumbling into this weird, like, rundown part of town where all the Slippermen, kind of like the Slippermen ghetto, I guess. And the weird music, kind of atonal. It's extremely appropriate to describe that mood and that atmosphere. And yeah, damn, like what else is there to say about this track? It's just amazing. The chorus is just extremely catchy, extremely poppy with the "You're in the colony of Slippermen. There's no who, what, or when." Extremely catchy, extremely poppy. And throughout that entire Tony Banks synthesizer solo, we hear some of Phil Collins just he's at his peak at this point. Like this is one of the peak Phil Collins drumming tracks. And yeah, I can't praise it enough. It's just one of the best tracks on the album, one of the three epics. And I want to give it a 10 out of 10, but I'm just going to stay with a 9.5 out of 10 for this one. Just because like I don't think it's quite as good as the Lamia and In the Cage, but it's pretty damn close. And then I'm also going to lump in the track Ravine, which is kind of like the outro of the Colony of Slippermen. It's just this cool atmospheric kind of like there's this jangly guitar playing in the background, kind of like evoking all these emotions of just darkness and like sailing down a ravine in the dead of night. It's a really cool track, another really atmospheric instrumental, which I don't think is filler at all. Like I think it just fits perfectly onto the album. And yeah, so we're gonna be moving on.
I must decide between the freedom I had in the rat race, or stay forever in this forsaken place. Hey, John!
Okay, guys, now we're on track 20, almost at the end here, with the song "The Light Dies Down on Broadway." Now, this is a pretty cool track. Not only does it reprise the title track of the album, but it also reprises the Lamia in the verses of the song. And we all know how I feel about the Lamia, so the verses of the song are extremely strong and really emotional because it really describes like a pivotal turning point on the album where this portal appears and Rail has the choice of going back to New York City. But then he also sees his brother John, who's drowning in the rapids, and he has to make a choice as the portal starts fading away. And he ends up choosing saving John at the end, which is a really emotional high point of the storyline and of the album. And yeah, it's just a really cool song. My only criticism of it is I think they could have done more with the chorus. Like the chorus of the song is just, and the light dies down, 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 down on Broadway. And I think they could have done more with that because the verses are just so strong and so emotionally charged. But yeah, overall, it's a really great song. There's like a great flute and drumming outro that's really awesome. And yeah, like it's another really good story-driven song. I'm a big fan of it, so I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Track number 21, Riding the Scree. I'm fucking obsessed with this song, guys. Like this song here is just one of Genesis's best instrumentals, and I feel like it's often forgotten because it's just lumped in here at the end of the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It's just an insane instrumental. I love every second of it. I mean, just the way it starts with that chugging bass line, the doo 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 doo, and then Tony Banks comes in with his most virtuoso keyboard solo that I could think of. And the first time I heard this, my jaw just like fell down. I was just amazed at how, usually Tony Banks is more of like an atmospheric keyboard player, but the solo when he comes in on this song is just an incredible virtuoso keyboard solo. But then it ends up locking into your classic Tony Banks, like the grand epic feel with the and it just, then at that moment it's Tony Banks again. And it's just, oh my god, it's a fantastic instrumental. There's a little bit of Peter Gabriel singing, like, so technically it is an instrumental, but it's just very minimal. And it's just the perfect song to describe the frantic pace of Rail just trying to save John racing in the rapids. And wow, it's just one of the most intense and dramatic Genesis instrumentals. And I feel like it's really effective coming at the end of the album. So yeah, classic track, a very strong 9.5 out of 10. Okay, guys, we have made it to the end. Holy shit, what a freaking album. And the ending of this album does not disappoint. It ends on an extremely high note, at least in my opinion, because it seems to be controversial. A lot of people find that the ending of this album is kind of anticlimactic. And in terms of a plot line, it kind of is anticlimactic. I'll give you that. But musically, it's incredible. And it ends the album on such a unique note. I mean, we got the two-song punch in the Rapids and It, the closing track. And I mean, in the Rapids, I had mentioned that Anyway is the most underrated Genesis song on the album, but I think In the Rapids gives it a really strong run for its money. I mean, this song has to be recognized as one of the most beautiful and some of the most emotional Peter Gabriel vocals ever recorded. I mean, when he sings, and when the water goes down, if you don't get goosebumps, check your pulse, because like you're probably dead. You're probably not living. I mean, just the way the song just gradually builds and the emotional nature behind it. You know, Rail trying to save his brother John, who's literally drowning in the rapids. It sounds like such a, you know, it hits you really hard emotionally is what I'm trying to say. And it really is some of Peter Gabriel's greatest vocal performances. And just the slow build, how it gradually reaches that crescendo, kind of similar to the Carpet Crawlers, how it slowly builds up on you and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is really intense. But it started off like really slow and laid back and just seamlessly builds to that climax. I mean, and what really impresses me here, it's another fantastic example of how Phil Collins' drumming just perfectly accentuates like these slower paced songs. I mean, like usually drummers kind of take the back seat on these songs, but Phil Collins is right there in front, and his drumming is just perfect from beginning to end. And coming in at, I think it's about 2 minutes long. Let me check it out. Yeah, 2 minutes and 28 seconds is just such a big highlight for me, and I really think it deserves a lot more recognition than it gets. And then that perfectly segues into the closing track, It, which is just one of the funniest ways to close an album. I mean, it has that classic synth riff, the and I just love that. It's so happy, it's so joyous. And it just has this grand finale feel to it. Lyrically, it ends up being about Rail, who ends up saving John, who's drowning in the rapids. And then they end up being the same person, and it's just a whole existential, spiritual bullshit. And, you know, the plot line doesn't matter. It's just musically, it's such a strong conclusion. And Peter Gabriel pokes fun at a lot of the people that make fun of progressive rock with the line, if you think that it's pretentious, you've been taken for a ride. And whenever I hear that line, it just, oh man, I just feel like it's Peter Gabriel giving his send-off. And, you know, just the perfect line to close out this progressive, masterful chapter of Genesis. Because for here on out, they would definitely lose like a big chunk of their spirit when Peter Gabriel ended up leaving the band. So yeah, It is just a fantastic closer. I'm going to give both tracks a 10 out of 10 because just like the emotions that they evoke with me are just way too strong to give it anything less. In the Rapids for its just masterful buildup, and It for its classic riff and its uplifting feel, as well as its existential lyrics. So yeah, that's the album right there. If I had to give it one criticism, sorry, the song It, that is, not the album, it would be that the production on the vocals doesn't sound that great. It kind of sounds a little like grating on the ears with Peter Gabriel's vocals, but the emotional tone of In the Rapids totally makes up for it. So that's it. What a fucking journey, guys. Thank you so much for listening to my incoherent ramblings, guys. I mean, this video was like a passion project for me because I'm just so obsessed with this album. And I just hope that my enthusiasm really got across for how much I love this epic masterpiece. Definitely one of the greatest double albums of all time. Right up there with The Wall by Pink Floyd, Physical Graffiti, Quadrophenia. Just all the classic double albums you could think of. This is right up there as one of the greatest. And definitely one of the darkest, one of the most modern sounding Genesis albums that you can hear from this early era of the band. So in terms of a rating, check the description below. I break it down for you. I don't want to get into it here, but it's a fucking masterpiece. It's one of the best Genesis albums, if not the best. Definitely in the top 3, along with Foxtrot and Selling England by the Pound. So thanks so much for watching, guys. And the next video, which should be coming out soon, is going to be on the new era of Genesis, the dreaded Phil Collins ears, which is actually bullshit because they're fucking awesome. So stay tuned for that, guys. And thank you so much again for watching. Peace out.